The world's richest people, with an estimated fortune of $227.8 billion on January 18th by the American economic magazine Forbes, Tesla CEO Elon Musk is currently the richest man in the world. The American billionaire's fortune has seen many ups and downs in recent years. It was estimated at over $300 billion at the beginning of 2022, before falling to less than $150 billion in January 2023. These variations are explained by cyclical reasons, such as the fluctuation in the value of financial assets, but also by Musk's acquisition of the microblogging platform Twitter/X after months of deliberation. In second place is Frenchman Bernard Arnault, CEO of the luxury conglomerate LVMH, who is also the only European in the top 10 this year. Arnault occupied the first position in the ranking in January 2023. The rest of the ranking this year is dominated by American multi-billionaires, including Amazon founder Jeff Bezos and Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates. Once again this year, women only rank much lower in the ranking. The world's richest woman, French woman Françoise Bettencourt-Meyers, heir to L'Oréal, currently ranks 15th, with an estimated fortune of $91.1 billion as of January 18, 2024.
How much does a barrel of oil cost? French oil giant TotalEnergies announced on Wednesday, February 7, that it achieved its highest profits ever in 2023, €19.8 billion, representing a 4% increase from the previous year. Despite its diversification into renewable energy, the company faced sharp criticism last year for its investments in fossil fuels. In 2023, TotalEnergies announced projects or acquisitions for the exploitation of these energies in several countries, including Brazil, Namibia, and Suriname. As shown in our infographic, based on data from the International Energy Agency, IEA, and OPEC, the price of oil collapsed during the first year of the coronavirus pandemic. But in 2021, both oil production and consumption returned to levels similar to those before the COVID-19 pandemic. As a result, average annual prices rebounded, reaching their highest level in nearly a decade in 2022, before experiencing a decline in the first 6 months of 2023. In June 2023, Saudi Arabia announced a reduction in crude oil production to boost prices. This reduction took effect last July. Saudi Arabia, a founding member of OPEC, is also the group's largest oil supplier, producing over 10 million barrels per day before deciding to voluntarily reduce production. The price of a barrel of oil had indeed decreased by around $20 compared to 2022. Despite this, prices in early 2024 are slightly below last year's average. The most visited museums in the world, the Louvre maintains its position as the most visited museum in the world. According to data from the Theme and Museum Index 2022 report, the most recent available, the Parisian institution welcomed 7.73 million visitors in 2022, up by 173% compared to 2021, 2.83 million visitors. The Parisian Museum, which houses numerous masterpieces including the Mona Lisa, thus surpasses the 12 museums of the Vatican City, which received over 5 million visitors in 2022. In third place among the most visited museums in 2022 is the Natural History Museum in London, with 4.65 million visitors, slightly more than 500,000 more than the famous British Museum, also located in the British capital. While the recovery of cultural venues attendance accelerated from the year 2022, it was not uniform across all regions of the world. While Europe and the United States had regained about 70% of their pre-pandemic attendance levels that year, Asian museums still struggled to attract visitors anew. The global cocaine market. Ecuador, a South American country of 18 million inhabitants, is grappling with violence after becoming a central hub for exporting cocaine produced in neighboring countries, Colombia and Peru, which together account for around 90% of the world's coca leaf production. As detailed in our map, although production areas are confined to the northwest of South America, this drug is a globalized commodity. According to the UNODC, there has been a strong growth in supply worldwide in recent years, accompanied by a similar increase in demand. Many regions are thus experiencing a steady rise in the number of cocaine consumers, where vaccination is mandatory for the entire population. On February 4, 2022, Austria became the second country in Europe to make COVID-19 vaccination mandatory for all adults. The Vatican was the first on the continent to do so, requiring it for its roughly 800 residents and those working there in October 2022. As shown on our map, few countries in the world have opted for strict mandatory vaccination for their entire population without distinction. Micronesia, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan made this choice during the summer of 2021, joined this winter by Ecuador, which also extended it to minors, and Indonesia. Rather than a general requirement, other countries have chosen to mandate vaccination for certain age groups. In most cases, this measure targets older individuals who are more vulnerable to the virus, as seen in Italy and Greece. However, in Costa Rica, vaccination is mandatory for all minors aged 5 and above. Outside of these countries, around 20 others have made vaccination mandatory for certain socio-professional categories and slashed or imposed restrictions that could be seen as quasi-mandatory. This is the case in France, where vaccination became mandatory at the end of January to access several public venues such as cinemas, museums, cafes, and restaurants. Which countries use the most pesticides in Europe? Since 1990, pesticide use worldwide has nearly doubled. While sales of plant protection products have increased almost everywhere in the world, the highest increases have been recorded in South America, Oceania, and Africa. On the European continent, the volume of pesticides used is roughly at the same level as it was 30 years ago and still struggles to decrease significantly. In absolute terms, France is one of the 3 largest consumers of pesticides in Europe, along with Spain and Italy. A figure correlated with the size of the agricultural area, as France has the largest in the European Union ahead of Spain. Looking at pesticide use per unit of cultivated area, France is slightly above the European average. French agriculture used an average of 3.7 kilograms of pesticides per hectare of land in 2021, according to the most recent data from the FAO, slightly more than the average of the 30 European countries studied that year, 3.4 kilograms per hectare. As shown in our map, figures vary from over 10 kilograms per hectare in the Netherlands to less than 1 kilogram per hectare in Scandinavia and Romania. The nature and quantities of pesticides used vary greatly depending on the types of crops, which is why there are large differences between countries, and also between regions within the same country. Territories that have developed highly specialized agriculture, with intensive crops requiring a lot of pesticides, such as potatoes, fruit trees, and viticulture, tend to display the highest values. On the same subject, the number of potentially dangerous pesticides still used in EU countries, among those for which substitution is recommended by the EU. The social housing crisis worsens in France, according to the latest annual report from the Abbé Pierre Foundation. Based on the most recent national surveys, 4.2 million French people suffer from inadequate housing or lack of personal accommodation. The report highlights an alarming worsening of the housing crisis and notes that if access to accommodation has deteriorated so sharply in recent years, it is also because access to social housing has also experienced a steep decline. As indicated by our graph, over the past decade, the number of households seeking social housing, HLM, in France has increased by more than 1 million, from 1.41 million in 2013 to 2.42 million in 2022. At the same time, the available HLM supply has remained generally stable, with 425,000 available units recorded in 2022 compared to 433,000 9 years earlier. The ratio between supply and demand has thus deteriorated significantly, dropping from 34% in 2013 to 18% in 2022. Overcrowding in prisons, a persistent problem in Latin America. The country, currently the main point of cocaine exportation from Peru and Colombia, has recently seen an escalation of gang-related violence. Between 2018 and 2023, street killings in Ecuador increased by 800%, rising from 6 to 46 per 100,000 inhabitants. Last year, nearly 8,000 homicides were recorded in the country. But the violence has reached its peak in recent days. On Tuesday, January 9, 2024, a group of armed men stormed a television studio of the Ecuadorian public channel TC Television and took journalists hostage. As shown in our infographic, based on data from the World Prison Brief, Ecuador's prisons are currently overcrowded. They are occupied at 112%. However, this phenomenon is much more pronounced in many Latin American countries. 5 countries on the continent have a prison population more than twice the capacity of their prisons: Peru, 229% occupancy; El Salvador, 237%; Bolivia, 264%; Guatemala, 293%; and Haiti, whose prison population is almost 5 times its official capacity. Which companies use Boeing 737 MAX 9 aircraft? On Friday, January 5, 2024, the plugging that replaces a potential additional door in the fuselage of a Boeing 737 MAX 9 operated by Alaska Airlines is torn off shortly after the aircraft takes off, intended to connect Portland, Oregon, to Ontario Airport in the suburbs of Los Angeles. Miraculously, no casualties occur, and the plane successfully makes an emergency landing. A few days later, Alaska Airlines and United Airlines, which operate the largest fleets of Boeing 737 MAX 9 aircraft in the world, announced that they had discovered poorly tightened bolts on the doors of several other aircraft of the same model. These failures are part of a long list of major incidents for the American aerospace manufacturer. As shown in our infographic, in addition to Alaska and United, 7 other airlines currently have Boeing 737 MAX 9 aircraft in their fleets, with over 200 aircraft in service as of January 2024, according to the travel industry information website Skift. On January 6, 2024, the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, issued an emergency airworthiness directive to all owners and operators of 737 MAX 9 aircraft. Boeing responded in a press release. "Safety is our top priority, and we deeply regret the impact this event has had on our customers and their passengers. We fully endorse and support the FAA's decision to require immediate inspection of 737-9 airplanes with the same configuration as the affected aircraft. The air transport industry is returning to profitability." After largely leaving behind the turbulence caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, the global air transport industry emerged from the storm in 2023, returning to profitability after 3 years of heavy losses. According to the International Air Transport Association, IATA, commercial airlines are expected to end the year with a net profit of $23.3 billion, after incurring losses of $3.8 billion in 2022, results significantly higher than the original forecasts. In December of last year, IATA had predicted that profits for 2023 would be very limited, forecasting a net income of only $4.7 billion for the entire industry. IATA expects industry revenues to reach a historic level of $964 billion in 2024, as 40.1 million flights are projected for the year, 1.2 million more flights than in 2019, before the pandemic. Despite the improved outlook, IATA Director Mr. Walsh believes his sector is in a challenging position. Airlines will always fiercely compete for their customers, but they remain far too burdened by costly regulation, fragmentation, high infrastructure costs, and a supply chain populated by oligopolies, he concludes, noting that the air transport industry directly supports over 3 million jobs worldwide.